Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Crystal, and today we're going to be talking about my August reading wrap-up. So, for some stats for the month of August, I read 3 YA books, 7 romance books, 1 thriller, 1 literary fiction book, 1 classic, and 2 urban fantasy paranormal romance. So I'm going to be going from my lowest rated to my highest rating. This month I only had 3, 4, and 5-star reads, so we're going to start with the 3-star reads. So the first one is The Winter's Curse. This book is a YA fantasy book, and it's almost set in like a sort of like a Roman type fantasy era. So the 2 main characters are Kestrel and Erin. Kestrel is the general's daughter, and she's sort of tasked with she has 2 options. She can either join the military or she can get married. But what she really wants to do is to be a musician and play music, and she ends up at a slave auction, and she ends up meeting a slave, like eye contact. She feels some connection. She decides to purchase him and bring him home and make him a slave on her father's estate. I definitely had some high expectations with this book because I felt like it had had a lot of love on BookTube and Bookstagram. I'd heard a lot of good things about it, and I was really expecting a great epic fantasy world and a great love story too, and I sort of felt like it fell short on that. The relationship between Erin and Kestrel was obviously problematic, but it was also just very rushed and surface level, and it was insta-levy. The plot was kind of weak. The character motivations were weak. I just felt like it was just okay. I hesitate to give YA books really low ratings unless I feel like they're just deeply problematic and they're just not a great book, because I know that I'm not the target audience for a YA book. I do feel like younger readers would probably enjoy this a lot more, or if you were new to YA fantasy, you would probably like this. But I don't feel like it had the crossover appeal that a lot of YA fantasy books do for adults. And the next book I read was The Fire Between High and Low by Brittany C. Cherry. This summer I went on a Brittany C. Cherry reading binge. I read so many of her books and I loved all of them pretty much. This one I feel like was the one that disappointed me the most. So this story is about Logan and Alyssa. They meet as teenagers. They both have kind of an abusive past. Logan especially has some really, really terrible things that happen in his past. With his father is abusive, his mother's a drug addict, he's involved in drugs, and it's really just the story of their relationship through the years. So it starts when they're teens and starts setting the stage for their relationship then, and then it goes into their future when they're adults. And I love Brittany C. Cherry, but this book was just disappointing. I felt like the early stage of the book was so beautiful. I loved seeing their connection as teens. Alyssa kind of saves Logan and helps him through some rough times, and he's honestly just a big jerk to her the whole time. And even in the end, when he went through some things and got some help and started, you know, trying to be a better partner, he just was a jerk. I don't feel like his character was as redeemed as I would have liked to have seen it, and I just kind of was almost mad at Alyssa for how she kept going back to him. It was so clearly an abusive relationship, and I don't know. I felt a little disappointed with this. I gave it a 3-star because there were still so many good things about it, but it just didn't give me the payoff that I was hoping for. So the next 3 books I read, I also gave 3 stars, and I talked about these pretty extensively in my Summerween reading vlogs. They are Lock Every Door by Riley Sagar, which I almost would say is closer to a 4, but not quite. And The Bone Witch by Bryn Chapeko, which I also really liked, but wasn't quite as what I was looking for. And then Angel's Blood by Neilani Singh, which was also pretty good. So if you want more information on my thoughts on those books, you can check out my reading my reading vlogs, but just know I gave them a 3 out of 5 star. They were good. I really did enjoy Angel's Blood probably, and Lock Every Door the most out of that, what I read for Summerween. Okay, and the next 3-star book that I read was Lady Sophia's Lover by Lisa Kleypas. I talked about this also in my historical romance readathon vlog. I liked it. I felt like this was my first Lisa Kleypas book, and I thought she's just a really wonderful writer. She does a lot of great work with creating chemistry between her characters, but it just felt like the depth of emotion in the relationship that I wanted wasn't quite there, and it felt more insta-lust than a real loving relationship. So I gave that a 3. And now onto the 4-star reads. So one of the 4-star reads was Wicked by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I adore Jennifer L. Armentrout's books. I think she's just a fabulous storyteller. I love her sassy heroines. I love the banter between her characters. I love her world building, and she is almost guaranteed to give you a cliffhanger ending that makes you want to read the next book right away. So this book is about Wren and Ivy. Ivy is the heroine, and she's the member of an order, and they are basically like fae hunters. So this has sort of a almost like a vampire hunter vibe, but they hunt fae. The fae in this world are dangerous to humans and evil and just pretty much terrible. So Ivy starts off, she sees something happen with members of the fae when she's out on a hunt, and it's something that should never happen with these people, this world, I guess, creatures? I don't know what you would call it, the fae. Something that was very out of the ordinary and was dangerous, and she goes to tell the members of her order, and they don't believe her. Wren, our hero, comes in, and he is part of a secret society of the order, and he immediately does believe her, and it's sort of their adventure to figure out the mystery of what that was throughout the rest of the book. And of course they have a super steamy relationship. I really liked this. I thought it was super fun, really enjoyable, and I'm excited to read the rest of the series. The next 4-star book that I read was An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole. I loved this book. I thought it was totally just lovely and beautiful and emotional and heartfelt. I really liked the little bits of history that it gave us to pre-Civil War times. I felt like there were an alarming amount of parallels between the country at that point in time in history to our country today. This book centers around Elle, who was a freed slave woman. She has an eidetic memory, so she can remember every single thing that she sees or reads or hears. She's like a secret agent for the Union, and she kind of goes to pose as a slave in Confederate homes to get information to be useful for the Union cause. And then we have Malcolm, who is also a Union agent, and he is posing as a Confederate soldier, and it's basically their love story, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and I loved Elle's character. I loved seeing how smart and intelligent she was. I loved how strong she was, and I loved the slow build relationship, but also the sort of explosive chemistry between her and Malcolm. It was great. 4.5 almost out of 5 stars. It was pretty much perfect. There were a few things with the plot towards the end that were predictable, but overall it was just a wonderful, beautiful story. My next 4-star read is Follow Me to Ground. I actually don't even remember. By Sue Rainsford. This is a literary fiction book, and it was honestly really, really... Oh, how do I even describe this book? It was weird, it was beautiful, it was intriguing. I feel like that is the best way to describe this. The writing is beautiful. This is her debut novel, and it's a really short book. It's only 150 pages. The writing was just gorgeous and unique and really makes you just stop and savor the words, but at the same time, it's not pretentious at all. It's just very smart and just lovely. But the story itself is really, really weird. So this story is about Ada and her dad, and they are like healers. It almost seems like it's in an alternate reality to what we live in right now. It is in our real world, like it's not necessarily a fantasy world. Like, if I could say what this reminds me of, it reminds me a lot of like Anne-Marie McElroy's books. If you've ever read anything like hers, sort of that magical realism, very lyrical, beautiful writing. It's very much like that. So they are healers, and the way they heal people in their little town is they open their bodies up, they take their organs out, they bury them in the ground, they do all kinds of stuff with the ground that is sort of mystical and strange. It was really interesting. I read this just in an afternoon. I just started it, and it was so intriguing that I honestly couldn't really put it down. But it's also really unsettling. So the plot of it is Ada falls in love with one of the people in the town, one of the normal people. They call them cures. I don't know if fall in love with it. I don't want to say that. They form a relationship, and it's definitely not a love story. they form a relationship, and her dad is very much against this relationship, and Samson, the man, his sister, is very much against the relationships. So it's sort of this weird dynamic between the four of them and the people in the town, and how they are trying to live a calm life. So basically this is a really strange, beautiful, compelling book that will leave you pretty unsettled when you're finished it, but I also highly recommend it because it's just so interesting, and just I haven't read very much like this, and it's definitely not something I would want to read every day, but it was really, really interesting. I liked it. Okay, now we're on to the 5-star reads. So this book was the first 5-star read I read of the month, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I'm sure I don't need to summarize what this is about. If you haven't read the book, you've probably seen the movie. This was a reread for me. I first read this when I was in my early 20s. I went through a phase where I wanted to read all of the classics, and so that was all that I read, and this was my first one. I will say that if you are interested at all in reading classics, this is a great one to start with because it's really all about the story, and the language is easy to understand. It doesn't have that barrier of some classics do where it's hard to get into the way that they speak. So I would highly recommend this if you're interested in classics. It's just a beautiful story, and I loved it so much. And then I read Midnight Sun. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I loved Twilight. I still love Twilight. I actually reread Twilight in March for the first time in probably at least 7 or 8 years. And I was a little disappointed that it didn't hold up to how I remembered it being, but so I was a little nervous about reading Midnight Sun because I sort of was bummed that I didn't love Twilight as much as I remembered it. But this book was honestly just so great. It was so nostalgic, and I really enjoyed seeing the story through Edward's point of view and his thought process. And I feel like Stephenie Meyer gets quite a lot of hate for her writing ability and her writing style. I know a lot of people say that she's a terrible writer, and they criticize Twilight for not being well written, and I would say it's not a well-written book. Sure, okay, yeah. Is it a compelling story? Yes. Did it change the way people read books? Yes. I feel like this book is really well done. I feel like it's a very interesting way to have a near omniscient narrator and have that work. And it's also, so Twilight is told in first-person point of view, this is told in third-person point of view, and I feel like that was very smart too, because really you couldn't tell this story from a first-person point of view with Edward as the narrator, because he would be thinking about, he would have to filter everyone's thoughts and every experience in that moment, whereas when you have it as a third-person narrator, he can look back on the situation and remember things that he saw or that he heard that contributed to his feelings in that moment. So I just really loved it. It took me a week to read. It's a very thick book, and I definitely feel like I was really interested in the first part of it, where we find out Edward's motivation and how he feels about her and why he's even drawn to her in the first place. And then the last half of the book, when they're together and all the action starts happening, I felt like that was not as interesting to me. And I definitely feel like there was a scene when Bella's in the hospital and they're trying to refabricate the scene and the car chase, all that. I felt like that was really kind of boring. It just seemed like it was way too much detail, and I've read an interview with Stephenie Meyer, and she said that was her favorite part to write because she didn't have to worry about lining up what happened in Twilight with what happened in Midnight Sun, and I can totally see that, but it also wasn't super fun to read. I thought it was just too much action without the thought, what was his motivation for doing this and why? It was just relaying the action of everything that happened. So I don't know. I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Probably a lot of that was for nostalgia reasons, but I just thought it was really great. I loved it. Okay, the next book I read is Forbidden by Beverly Jenkins. So this is post-Civil War historical romance between Ryan, who is the child of a slave. He's the son of a slave mother, plantation owner, father. He's white passing. And then we have Eddie, who is a free black woman who is trying to make her way in the West. She wants to own a restaurant. She wants to be a cook. And it's their love story. And the forbidden aspect of it is that because he's white passing and she's a black woman, they weren't able to be together for that reason. So there's a lot of just really slowly beautiful character building in this. I just love this. I thought it was just a pretty much perfect love story. I adored it. 5 out of 5 stars. I also talk about that in my historical romance reading vlog. I'll link both of those vlogs down below if you care for more insight into how I felt about these books. And the last 3, we have The Madness of Lordy and Mackenzie by Jennifer Ashley. I loved this so very much. 5 stars. I don't think you could get much better than this for a historical romance. It was beautiful. We have Ian Mackenzie. He's on the autism spectrum, and so but it wasn't recognized at that time, so he was put in an insane asylum as a child, and everyone thinks that the behaviors that he does are because he's insane and not because he is on the autism spectrum. His struggle with trying to learn what love feels like and what love is, and his draw to Beth, who is the heroine, a widow, was just so much fun and just lovely, and I absolutely adored their relationship and their character. There's also a little bit of a mystery in this too, and it was just wonderful. I loved it. And then I read Wicked and the Wallflower by Sarah McLean. I read this as part of a group read on Instagram with To All the Nerdy Girls and Bookish Kelly, and this was only my second Sarah McLean book that I've ever read. I adored this book. I love this series. I'm reading the 3rd one right now. This book is perfect. I feel like with this series in particular, there's such a strong feminist aspect to these books that really, like the Fighting the Patriarchy, if you're a fan of that, you will love this series. If you want strong feminist heroines and really women who are independent and strong and go after what they want to and sort of break those society norms, definitely recommend the series. It was perfect. And so we have Felicity, who is a wallflower. She's kind of plain. She's approaching spinsterhood. She feels like she just has, not much of a chance to marry, and she doesn't want to marry if she doesn't have passion in her relationship. She doesn't want to just marry for money or security. She wants a passionate, loving relationship. And she meets the devil, the hero. He goes by Devil, and he makes a bargain with her that she will be able to land a duke and get a high standing in society again if she marries this duke. But her condition is that, okay, but he has to want me. He has to feel passionately about me. And no surprise that she doesn't actually fall in love with the Duke. She develops the relationship with Devil. It's beautiful, perfect, fun. I loved it so much. 5 out of 5 stars. And the last book in my August wrap-up is Brazen and the Beast by Sarah McLean. This book, guys, it's so perfect. I feel like I've talked about this book quite a lot, and I probably will not stop talking about it because this is everything that I want in a romance book. This is everything that I want in a historical romance, especially. We have Hattie and Beast, and so this book starts out, Hattie is turning 29, and she's also a spinster. She is deciding that she's going to have one last year before she fully embraces spinsterhood and being alone, where she's going to just live her life to the fullest. And the opening scene is her getting into her carriage, and Beast's love interest is tied up in her carriage. They sort of have some really great banter, and she ends up untying him and throwing him out of the carriage. And it's just, this book is so fun. It's fun, lighthearted, powerful, emotional, sexy, perfect. This is just, I don't know. If you haven't read this book, please read it. It's perfect. If you read one book out of these, read this one. And maybe Follow Me to Ground, just because I want to know everyone's thoughts on that, because it was just such a weird little beautiful book. Alright, well that concludes my August wrap-up. I read 15 books. It was a great month. I'm excited to see what I read next this month. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.